Hello, students. We all know 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us, but especially for you as a student who are giving their board exams of IGCSE, A-Level and IBDP this year. To support you, we at EduVoyage have started a Prepathon series where our senior most faculties will be sharing with you some quick tips and tricks which will help you prepare for your exams in the most efficient manner, and you can plan your learning process so that you can boost your grades. So let's start. Today we have with us Emma sir, who have been associated with us from last 10 years. He is a senior faculty at EduVoyage. He's a CELTA trained from UK. He's worked as a curriculum developer. He's been a teacher trainer. He's been the head of department in one of the premier Indian international school and have worked with many international teams for the development of English as a language. I welcome you, sir, for our Prepathon series, where you can provide some insights and some valuable tips you can give to our students so that these last 2 weeks they can prepare themselves in the best possible manner.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon, dear students. Thank you so much for taking this initiative, Dimple, ma'am, because I think, like you rightly said, it's been a tough year for all of us. And I think we as educationists, as the carvers of tomorrow's nation, I think, and creating global citizens, I think, this initiative is something that I'm very proud of to be associated with, because this is something that technology has taught us, of even reaching out to the students who probably we were not able to access in physical classrooms. So thank you so much, ma'am, for having me here and taking this initiative, and I'll be more than happy to put my little input that can make about any sort of difference to the students who are appearing for the exams this year.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I would like to ask you one important question. Like, over these 16 years that I have been there with IGCSE students and parents, I've seen that they take English very lightly. Sometimes they feel like, that other subjects needs more preparation. And they keep solving a lot of past papers in other subjects. They give more emphasis to other subjects. But in fact, I've seen there they get grades. But English, it's not easy to get. They really need to develop good skills to reach to that level. So I would like you to throw some light on that.
Okay, this is a very pertinent question that you've raised, and I think also a concern. We also know that because we live in Mumbai, which is a metro, and we assume that we speak good English, all of us, and because we watch a lot of programs, and students generally come from houses where English is spoken in combination with their mother tongue as well. So we believe that yes, there is no need to study a subject which is going to be unseen. So that is one myth that I would like to bust during this session. Is English is definitely a subject, and especially when it comes to IGCSE, when we compare it to ICSE or SSC, the level that is required for these boards is definitely nowhere compared to what is required at IGCSE, and the simple reason being that it's the first language. So when they are expecting you to write and read and understand with the proficiency of a native speaker, then that is the point where the challenge starts. And in IGCSE also, there are very strict skills that the students are being assessed on. So knowing English, being able to communicate with English, and being able to get a gist of what you read is very different from being able to read an exam paper, being able to read an unseen passage, and being able to understand what is expected out of you and how it needs to be produced in into the target genre, as we call it. So, and this is not a skill that can be developed overnight. It is something which requires constant teaching. It is something which requires constant practice. And most importantly, it is something which requires constant feedback, introspection, and reflection. Now, having said that, once all those things have been being practiced regularly, then we reach a stage where I always patently say the same thing. If you prepare for English throughout your 2 years, there'll be one subject less to worry about before your examinations. Because like I said, if you are doing English regularly once a week, investing about 2 hours a week in doing English, then you don't have to rack your brains towards the end, downloading the past papers or ensuring that you solve the last paper till the last minute and quantitatively so that you feel that you're prepared. So here quantification is not as important like it is in some of the other subjects. For example, mathematics, the more you practice, the better you get. With English, it is about slow and steady wins the race. You do regular work, you do the same amount of work, and towards the end, you just revise what you've done.
Also, sir, in fact, with this, I think I remember one of our student, Sham Biani, who joined us in grade 9th IGCSE. So he was good at understanding the subjects of maths and accounts and business studies and economics, but he was not getting marks in business and eco because his presentation skill, his language skill were quite weak. But I think after a year when he was with you and his English improved, he just not improved in English as a language, where he was even finding challenging to clear that paper, but also I observed his business and eco grades went up. So I think you would also agree that it also helps in getting better grades in other subjects if their language skills are in place.
Absolutely, and especially for theoretical subjects like economics, business, and even to be able to understand certain questions in the non-theoretical subjects. A word here and there, makes an entire, like for example, difference like analyze or comment, which could be a part of other subjects as well. If the child is not trained to be able to answer to a question which requires you to analyze in comparison to a question which requires you to comment, then obviously you are not looking at the required, the kind of marks that you're expecting. And having said that, students and parents generally assume that understanding basic English is what is required to answer a paper for the Cambridge. It's not that. There are very, very strict skills that they're testing out. They're testing you on the tone, they're testing you on the attitude, they're testing on your argumentative skills, they're testing you on the writer's purpose. So these are very specific skills that they want to make sure that you are aware of. Keeping in mind that your grammar, your punctuation, your sentence structures, the basics of your English are already in place, because once you are studying for first language English, the kind of skills which people think they have already acquired, which means being able to write a grammatically correct sentence, or being able to structure an answer, or being able to put your commas and full stops in place, they feel if they are able to do that, they are prepared for English. This kind of a skill of being able to write properly, being able to paragraph properly, being able to structure properly is just the base that is expected to be known.
Right.
And obviously, like you rightly said, in case of Sham, I was fortunate enough to have trained him. I think that was the reason why his marks showed a hike. They just showed a jump in economics and business for sure, because I think he touched A star in both the subjects.
Yes, he got A stars.
But in English, he was not able to. I think he just did very averagely in English, because the kind of skills that he was able to develop in those last few months that he was with us, they automatically took care of English to that level which was required for the non-English subjects.
Correct.
But for English, the skills that are required are far more sophisticated. They are far more complex, for which, those last 2, 3, 4 months were not enough. Having said that, yes, it did bring about a change in his performance. He definitely moved from failing to an average grade, but it wasn't enough to having, pushed him to a level that he would have wanted to see on his mark sheet.
Yes, sir. Very rightly you had put it, because the last 3-4 months do make a small difference. But I feel because English, they really need time to build up those skills, and then reach to the level of Cambridge English examination. So I want to ask you, how much time do you feel is right for a child for a grade 10th examination? How much time he needs to put in regularly? What kind of an effort he should put in? And what kind of textbooks or resources he should follow in order to reach to his best potential?
Okay, so I think I'll break that question up into a few parts. So I'll work in the reverse order. For example, the textbooks. So I have so far not referred to any textbooks as yet, because textbooks are more introductory, And I feel it is more about the exposure to the actual passages in the exams that allow a student to be able to psychologically accept that this is the length that I will be reading in so much of time. These are the number of words I'm expected to write. Because what happens is that if you get into uh, the passages in the textbook, then you are kind of preparing at that level. And unfortunately, what happens is that there are so many exams that are happening internally also.
Right.
So the schools also do not have the time, which I also partly agree, because being a part of the school, they do not have the time to be able to practice individual skills at length that it is required to be done. So what happens is that past papers are kept till the end, and then suddenly being thrown open to an entire cage of past papers, as I would call it, you are overwhelmed. So you need to kind of get into that practice of being able to choose. And I think you need someone to guide you to do that. Because past papers, yes, the length is the same, the questions are the same. But as a teacher, I mean, your school teacher or the teacher you go to should be able to guide you and tell you how the past papers need to be solved. It's not just about downloading the past papers, solving and checking from the mark scheme, because the mark scheme is very it's just a guideline. Things
Absolutely.
can go beyond the mark scheme. So your teachers, whether it's a school teacher or the teachers you are going to, should be able to tell you that this is the genre that needs to be studied. I put that in simple terms for mathematics. You can't tell the child to learn the table of 8 before learning the table of 2. You start off with the table of 2, you move to 4, you move to 8, and so on and so forth. So there is, or there should be rather, a clear understanding where what topics of English need to be taught first, how you which is the next linked topic, and then you slowly graduate to the more complex ones, keeping in mind that a constant revision and a constant stepping down is required, because you can't learn letters, then move to a speech, and then say, oh, I forgot what a letter is like. So somewhere down the line, whoever is guiding you, whether it's your school teacher or your tuition teacher, must be able to shock you. Like they say, if you keep on eating the same food, your body does not react, or you keep performing the same exercise, then you don't build muscles. I mean, being a gymmer, I understand that totally. So I can't be doing the same exercise for 10 years and say, oh, my biceps are not building up. I will have to work on those. Let's say I'm working on my biceps, I will have to change my exercise after 2 months. So similarly, if you are solving those papers, then your teacher has to jolt you by giving you another component and say, okay, now let's do this. We did this a month back. So that kind of, the permutations and the combinations that are required, that need to be very streamlined. And I think that's the part where the school teacher or the tuition teacher or your teacher at the academy plays a very, very indispensable role to guide the children,
Absolutely. Just solving the past papers, downloading it, and looking into the mark scheme, it doesn't help children. They need a guide to give them consistent practice and also help them realize their mistakes so that they make new mistakes, not the old ones. So, in fact, I would like to ask you, sir, here, because the time you joined EduVoid, I've seen the boost in the grades of our students, because before you, the highest grades they touched was B. And after you joined, I've seen them, a lot of students getting A's and A stars. So, what is your approach? How do you make your children excel? How do you make them practice? Do you give them a lot of work? Or do you do a very close observation with them and guide them in that manner, step by step they keep improving?
Okay, so I feel what has really worked for me, and what my the school that when I was, the school that I was heading the English department in, and that's what my principal also said. So whatever you do is tried and tested. So when a certain method or a certain technique is working, you don't really feel about the need to bring about a drastic change. Of course, a little change here and there is always welcome. Like, for example, initially we used to give student worksheets. Now we have gotten a little more into compiling them, so that so that's of course the practical part of it. But coming back to your question of how I make my students practice, let's say I pamper my students a lot. I mean, my students, they are spoon fed. And I Personally, for my subject, I can't, there is not a blanket rule, because I think I leave that to each individual subject. Even when I was heading the academics in the school, I never got into that much of an interference, because I think each subject expert needs to be left to do whatever is required.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't put your finger into so many pies. You can only guide them as the head, but you can't impose your style of
Absolutely.
teaching or practicing. So what works with me is, I do not believe in the concept of giving a lot of tests, for the simple reason that schools are doing it any which way. You have your class tests, you have your summatives, you have your formatives, and certain schools are doing 2 or 3 mock exams as well. So there is absolute no need for me. So I do not believe in the policy of giving tests. That's one thing, because the schools are doing it. What I believe is kind of giving them exposure to a variety of papers that I have seen and I have access to from 2005 till 2020. So I pick and choose my topics. Let's say, for example, if I'm doing letter writing, then there could be about 15 or 20 papers that have appeared all over the years. So I would pick out those 4 or 5 passages, and I would then discuss them, and I say, you know what, this letter we did, this is also a letter and that's also a letter, but how is this letter different from the other one?
Correct.
So you make them understand that it could be a letter, it could be a speech, it could be an article, but how something that is applicable in paper A, let's say in 2007, was definitely not applicable in paper B in 2011. Both require you to write letters. Both require you to write letters to your grandparents, or let's say to your husband or your wife. But how was the approach different? How was the thought different? How was the perspective different? To what extent could we take content from the passage of the first part? To what extent it was not required to be taken from the second half? So those kind of things I keep on doing with my children. And what I think what really works, Dimple ma'am, is a lot of analogies, where I keep on telling them, children, do you remember this we did in this paper that was titled so and so? So that reverse tracking or trailing and telling them, remember we did this passage that was about this. Can you draw a connection here? So I think that, by the grace of God, because I've been doing all the papers, and I've been constantly being with my children for so long, I think that is something that I am happy that I'm able to immediately connect to. So I tell them, you did this paper quickly. Do you remember, guys? We did this paper, and then it starts coming back. So once we connect, and I think psychologists also prove that when you start connecting images, when you remind a child of something and say, remember this, a child is able to remember that very well. So for English also, I tell them, see, this passage connects to that one. Do you remember what we did this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we use actual practical methods like that, which oh yes, yes, yes. Because children, obviously, I know will never go home, will never read the passage again. Once it's done, they close their books and it's done with. But when, as a teacher, you can act as a catalyst and tell them, remember 2 months back when we did this topic, so they start forming batches in their mind. They start understanding that, these are the kind of questions that require this approach. Oh, if this comes, I can remember this. Same thing for descriptive writing. So we tell them that, remember, descriptive writing for this, I'm sure you can use phrases from here to this. So, that a lot of connections, a lot of permutations, a lot of combinations, and a lot of analogies, that I did this, I did this. Remember, you had asked me this question and I had responded like this. So that kind of a thing, that constant reinforcement allows children to get that clarity. And you just can't do once and say it's over and done with. It has to be constantly hammered into the children. You constantly have to keep on telling them, reminding them, because obviously, unfortunately, they don't take English still very seriously.
Mm.
So you are omnipresent when it comes to their writing. You become omnipresent when it comes to, reading their work, giving feedback, writing samples for them, which again, I would like to share with you that I have done a lot, because, getting the mark scheme knows the points are there, but how those points converted into viable paragraphs, into proper structured paragraphs, as to, how much weightage is given to each section. Students say, oh, 350 words, I've written 350 words. Have they realized that the 350 words or the 400 words that you're writing need to be spread in this particular manner? So, samples work in that manner, and then they become very controlled, so it's a little controlled. No. First paragraph, so many words. Second paragraph, I think so many words. So I think
Yeah.
that has worked with me.
Yeah, I think so. Exactly. With the sample, they know what will be the flow.
Exactly.
what is expected by the examiner, what should be the introduction, what should be the body, what conclusion should be drawn. So,
Yeah.
so you just mentioned that you don't take tests, but I've seen you checking a lot of papers. Like
Yeah.
you're busy in checking.
Yeah.
So, what exactly are they not tests, or is it like a continuous writing practice that you keep giving them? And how? Also, I would like to ask you, how do you help children to improve their vocabulary and sentence structures?
Okay, so yes, like you rightly said, even when we used to have physical classes, I had my colored folders that, like Monday was a red and Tuesday was a blue and Wednesday was a pink. And, so I had my folders batch wise, which were used to be full and used to keep on asking me, so what are all these colors doing in your bag? And I said, no, ma'am, each folder represents a particular day and a particular batch. So, and even now, of course, I've become also techno savvy. I'm not a dinosaur anymore. So I have been
Yeah.
able to, we all have become techno savvy, and I'm happily giving a lot of feedback online, with the emails that I'm getting from students. So, yes, like you rightly said, I don't believe in quantity, ma'am. I really don't believe in the quantity. So 99% of the times that the students are doing is carryover work, because to me, I do not want to read 2 pages of just filled in for the sake of it, because it's the waste of their time, and my time is valuable as well. So I start work in class, I explain everything to them in class, I give them a structure, which you have probably seen on the groups that you are on, where I click a picture so that the parents also know. So I tell them, okay, now we have 5 paragraphs, the first and the second one we have done in class, the third and the fourth and the fifth. I've explained to you this and this and this needs to be written like this. So unless and until you are keeping that in control and telling them that I need 5 points here and 4 points here and 5 points here, and so I mean that kind of a control is required, and that is what they complete for homework. Because going home, because English is not 2 plus 2, and I don't want children to do their work 3 4 days late when their mind is already concentrated with other subjects. Then they feel, oh, it was an essay, so I can write about anything. So it's better to discuss it in class and tell them that, for example, if it's a descriptive essay about a restaurant, and I have already described the atmosphere and the ambience in the first paragraph, and second paragraph, everyone is going to write about the staff. Now, their description about the staff or the stewards can be different, but everybody is going to write about the stewards. In the third part, everybody is going to write about the food. Now, I can write about a Mughlai restaurant, somebody else could write about a Chinese, somebody could write about a vegetarian, somebody could write about about burgers and pizzas. That's irrespective. But the fact remains that in the third paragraph, it's only going to be food which is going to be described. So I stick to that. I'm a little strict, because students tend to get haywire. They just tend to want to do things their own way, and that is not good in an examination. If they know that I've made a planner and my planner needs to follow a particular point, that checklist of the examination that Cambridge uses to tick and mark and annotate, that is taken care of. So that is one thing that I do in class, and that is the feedback also that I give them. When they have done this, then I would give a feedback. I generally follow the IB style of giving feedback to students, where you don't give them the answer, you tell them, have you thought about this sentence? Have you looked into this? So when IB corrections are done, they don't give you answers. They give you provocations, as we call it. They provoke you to think about alternatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they highlight something and there's a comment written. Did you think about this? Do you really feel? So, the students automatically get startled as to what, and then they start reflecting. So the moment they start reflecting and then they feel, oh, why this has been highlighted, then they start thinking. It's very easy for me to write the answer and give it to them, which I generally avoid.
Huh. And that reflection is very, very important, because that helps them to, you know, uh, improve on their existing writing pattern and
Yeah.
thought process. And then step by step, gradually they can move forward in that subject. So now coming directly to the students who have been waiting for your tips and tricks, like, what you can share now. So I would like to ask you, what are the papers, the paper numbers, the marks, the duration, and how to go about it. What things to be kept in mind while preparing in these last 2 weeks and in the examination hall. What things they should stress upon, which part of the question paper, and how to go about it, like, overall. So that. it helps them.
Okay, so we do first language English, and our paper code we all know is 0500. We do paper one and paper two, except for the students from Podar or Ambani or some other schools. Ecole now has moved on to MYP. Oberoi has moved to MYP, but certain schools who are still following IGCSE, they do coursework. So one of the most prominent schools that still doing coursework is Podar and Ambani for that matter. So we are not going to talk about that now. I'll talk about the more traditional papers that most of the schools are doing, which is paper one and paper two. So the paper one is called as the reading paper. And here your reading skills, and it's not just reading. Reading translates into comprehension. It translates into being able to understand what is being given. So here the paper pattern has changed from 2020 onwards, and they have done away with the core paper. So now all the students get to write one paper, which is the standard paper any which way. The first question is for 15 marks, which is a comprehension question, which is a factual passage that they get. So passage A is a comprehension where they read questions and then the questions are broken up into 1 mark, 2 marks, 3 marks. And that's very important for them to understand, to write the number of points in an answer that reflect the number of marks that have been allocated. The moment they give you something like explain this, then make sure that the synonyms or the explanation for those words in the phrases are given. There may be at times very, very common words which we may do not feel the need to explain, but that's the trick. You need to also look at those words and find explanations for them. The second question, which is passage B, is again for 15 marks, which is the summary question. It's again a factual passage. So ensure that you find about 10 to 12 good points. And of course, if you have been doing past papers, make sure that you check the point from each number in the mark scheme. So at times, for example, in number 1, you will have this slash this slash this, which means out of all of those, you need to have 1. So, if they're giving you slashes, they don't mean that there are 3 points. It means that either of those 3 constitute 1 point. So that is one thing we need to be sure of. And then, of course, we're looking at the number of words, which is 120 for them. So make sure you combine 2 or 3 points into a complex sentence and you present it. And timing is very, very important. You have 3 different passages to read. You have different sets of questions to answer. So somewhere down the line, of course, there's going to be a clock in the examination hall, which you must keep a very strong watch over to ensure that you don't trail away from the time. The third question, which carries 50 marks, so we have 15 marks comprehension, 15 marks for the summary. The third passage, which is passage C, carries the maximum number of marks, the most weightage, which is for 50 marks. And in that you have vocabulary. So there are 3 parts to the vocabulary. So make sure that whatever words you're writing are written in the right context. A different kind of meanings are applicable, and you should always be able to understand that whatever meanings you're giving are the correct meaning in the context. The second part, which most of the students still find very, very difficult and they don't score very well, is the writer's effect question, which again moves on to commentary, both at IB and A levels. That's one area which requires students to go beyond the mere meaning or the superficial meaning of the words and phrases that they're looking at or the images they're looking at. So there, avoid things like it creates a very good picture, or the writer wants to highlight something, or the writer wants to put emphasis. Those kind of hollow statements don't really get you any marks. You must be able to question yourself. Why is the writer using this word and not that? For example, a very common example that I could give you is the glass broke and the glass was shattered. So when I look at the word broke does not bring in a sense of violence. It does not bring in a sense of something purposeful. It could be an accident. But the moment you say shattered, it already shows some sense of violence. It shows a higher intensity of something that has been damaged beyond repair. So you need to understand, you need to question yourself and then be able to write that down. The last part, of course, is the directed writing task, where we have about 6 genres to study, which is letter, article, speech, journal, interview, formal report, and newspaper report. So we need to understand the genres. So I'm sure, the tuition teachers or the school teachers must have told them the difference of it. So the technique for extracting information remains the same. So please please remain fixed to the content of the passage. We are not looking at your knowledge about it. We are not looking at, they could be describing a particular place or a particular scenario where you might have experienced yourself to be in, or you might have some existing knowledge about it, but that becomes irrelevant if it has not been documented in the passage. It's a directed writing, as the name suggests. You have to extract the information from the passage. So sufficient details from the passage must be reflected in the answer, which shows the examiner that you have intently read the passage. You have been able to read each line, each word, each phrase, and been able to extract the information and put them into the right paragraphs while compiling your letter or article or whatever it is. It's also an empathetic question, which it requires the student to assume the role of somebody in that passage. They could say, imagine you are the grandchild, imagine you are the old woman, imagine you are a school inspector, imagine you're a journalist. So that is very important. You need to step into the shoes of that character, think like them, adopt the kind of language they would have used depending on the scenario, the kind of emotions they would have reflected, and then show that in the writing part. So once that has been done, then you need to count and say, okay, have I got these number of points? Don't so avoid the two extremes. Don't just take 2 points and elaborate a paragraph on it, and don't take 10 points and list them down. I think that works. I think even for economics and business studies, where you say, take a few points, sufficient number of points, but explain them, give details about it. And that holds good for English as well. So that takes care of paper one. We quickly move to paper two. In paper two, they are looking at your argumentative and persuasive skills. So you could either get a speech, an article, or a letter. So the content of the passage, there will be two passages that you'll be getting in your exam. So you must be able to take ideas from both passages. Don't think, oh, I have passage A and I think I have a lot of content to write here. You will have to assimilate, you will have to collaborate the ideas and the content from both the passages. So one step is to extract the information, and the second step is to challenge that information, argue against the points, because it's called as response to text. You could be reading an article, let's say, about the use of mobiles or about healthy food, about exercise. So you must be able to pick out the straightforward points that are there, but at the same time, you must also be able to debate, give some counter arguments against those points. So that's the first part. The second part, of course, is 4 questions, 2 descriptives and 2 narratives. I think 80 to 90% of the students prefer to write narratives, because descriptive language requires a lot of good vocabulary. There's a lot of exhaustive vocabulary. So the main difference between descriptive and narrative is the narrative requires a change of scene. It requires a development of a story or a plot. There needs to be different things happening. This happened, and then you must intrigue the reader as to what's going to happen next. That is the kind of approach that the examiners are looking. When it comes to descriptive, then you are describing, there could be movement as well, but it means describing things in so much of detail that you actually start imagining that scene in front of your eyes. If I'm describing a person or a beach or a garden or whatever, the details about the color, the texture, the smells, the sounds need to be in so much of details that I'm able to transport myself into that scene. So for descriptives, ideally, you must break up your descriptive writing into 4 or 5 sub-themes. For example, if I'm talking about a beach, then maybe the clouds, the ice cream man, the people sunbathing, maybe the water, and then maybe some sort of sandcastle or something. You break it up into 5 parts, and then you start describing each of them in detail. So all of that together becomes your beach. For a story, it's very important to have a setting. What is the kind of surrounding that the story is taking place? Characterization is important. How does the character look? How does the character talk? Because I need to visualize that person as a villain or as a hero or as a victim or as a perpetrator. And then we have dialogues. When the characters are using dialogues in the story, it brings them to life. It kind of makes you feel as if you're watching a film. And then you have
I'm actually imagining and visualizing watching a film. And I feel like, that it's so beautiful, what you are describing. I feel like becoming your student and learning Cambridge English.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, and I think that is it. And then emotions are very important. I think we all get affected by emotions. So why not get your examiner also emotionally connected? For example, I have
I want to stop you here and I want to ask you, because you've been the IGCSE examiner for so many years.
yeah.
So what is that will impress you while checking that paper? Is that emotions, what he's expressing?
I feel yes, emotions. I will not lie. Being an emotional person myself, and being very sensitive and being attached to each of my students, very, very, on a personal basis and connecting to them. I think we can all relate to that as Indians, no
Absolutely.
matter which part of the world we have grown up in and which part of the world we have spent half our lives in. Coming back to your question, ma'am, I think what we have been trained to mark and accept and maybe also propagate and kind of market is correctness of language. You can I may be able to understand your feelings well. I may be able to understand, oh, that this is a very interesting story, but if it has hiccups, if it has those jerks, then automatically I have to withdraw myself from giving you the kind of marks that I'm looking. So correctness of language is very, very important. That is something that we need to look at. And the second thing, of course, like we say, has the child been able to follow the protocol of IGCSE? Like I was saying, has the child been able to use emotions? Has the child been able to use dialogues? Has the child been able to do this and that? And I think that all is something which we have a structure to see. And then overall, and the overall effect of the answer, as to the length, as to we can't just decide the marks on one criteria, but we could definitely say whether it's Cambridge checkpoint or IGCSE correctness. Your sentences, your paragraphing, your grammar, spellings. Also, in fact, we don't say, okay, one spelling gone wrong, half a mark gone wrong, or two spellings gone wrong, no, 1 mark gone. We don't go by that standard. So if we are making mistakes with very commonly used words, then I think it becomes a problem. But if the child is using ambitious vocabulary, is using good vocabulary, and has made a few mistakes here and there, then we don't really penalize the child. But if there's a constant error of spellings with THEIR or THERE, or these kind of things, or necessary, whether it's a double C or a double R or whatever, those kind of things need to be looked into.
Mhm. Does the handwriting also matter while
Uh,
checking a paper?
I think to some extent it does. You don't have to use calligraphy to get good marks, and it does not necessarily mean that if your handwriting is very good, you're going to get good marks. But it means that whatever you write needs to be legible. I should be able to make out your alphabets and the words that you're forming in the question paper.
Absolutely. If examiner is not able to read it, then how will he or she give marks on it?
Absolutely, yes.
Legibility is really important.
Yes.
So, sir, now, since the time is very less, so what are three things you can tell them for this last minute preparation as far as English is concerned? What should they focus on?
Okay, so one thing is that I would strongly discourage students from solving and writing papers about 2 or 3 days before the examination.
At this stage, it doesn't make
No. And also, the second thing I would say is that I'm sure they already have their resources from school or from their tuition teachers. I think this is the most important thing, is to redo what has already been done, look into your mistakes, check those papers again and see. Initially, when I was solving these papers 3 months back, I did not understand, but after discussion in class or with my tuition teacher, or after looking at the mark scheme, I was able to understand where I went wrong. So that reflection is very important, because uh, two things. One is that there is no end to solving papers. And the second thing is that the more papers I look at, the more I will feel I'm unprepared.
correct.
Because every paper is going to have a different passage. There will be a set of vocabulary that you will not understand. So don't go by that, because it will only keep on reminding you of how unprepared you are, no matter how well you have been doing so far. And the last thing is, don't panic, and revise the samples, revise the work that has been corrected in class, because it is the application. If you've been able to understand what has been done so far in terms of corrections, feedback, discussions, samples, uh, whatever notes you've been given. I think this needs to be, because you don't have so much of time. So instead of solving papers, which again I feel is a very mechanical process in this last 1 week, you should have been solving papers from the beginning of grade 9. If you haven't done it, there is no point doing it now. So about a week before, I mean about 5 6 days before the exams, you should only concentrate on ensuring that the teachers are giving the feedback to you for whatever work has been done. Please follow up with your teachers, make sure miss whatever, send our papers back, and do not solve any more papers. Okay, you can definitely go through the question papers, see the mark scheme to see how much you've understood, and go through the feedback and the corrections and the samples. And I think we are good to go.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And English is one subject you can never do it last minute. For that matter,
Absolutely
any
not.
language,
Yeah,
whether it's French or Hindi, like, they need to consistently doing it from the beginning because it's a journey. And,
yes,
and this is not the time when they can do anything new. It's only that they can reflect upon their previous work and the feedback given to them and improve upon
absolutely.
that. Yeah. And yes, very importantly, what sir mentioned, now there is no need to panic or stress, whether it's English or any other subject. Just revise what you have done and go with a relaxed mind in your examination so that, like, you read the question carefully and you are able to, like, because those kind of thoughts, those kind of creative juices should flow in your mind
Yes,
and you are
reading the
able to write.
question, yes. Like I would reiterate what Dimple Mama said, is read the question very carefully. Who are you expected to write as? What are you writing? Are you debating? Are you agreeing? Just understand, like when I do it in class, I tell them children highlight these words. It's an article written for a teenage magazine. So your target audience is teenagers, not adults. So the small, small things that, that we've been doing in class must be brought back into active mode.
Correct. So, with that note, we come to an end of this session. Hope it has really helped you and given you some valuable insights with the kind of expertise Ahmed sir has and kind of tips he has shared with you. Students, do take care of that during the examination and for your preparation. We wish you all the very best for your upcoming exams. If you want to connect with us further, the details are given below. Love and blessings to all of you. God bless you.
Okay. Love you, students. All the best. May God be with you, and may you all keep shining and making your parents and teachers proud. Stay blessed.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.